My mother reverted to Islam before me. Um, Hers was a very, so I grew up in a deeply Catholic environment. So my family is Syrio Catholic, and we were I come from a family of church builders, and so really tradition. But what was inculcated in us from that, from childhood, was a sense of piety, belief in God. Generosity was very key to how we lived our lives. Even as young ones, we gave a bit of our pocket money to charity, because that was how we were brought up. And modesty. So even though I was Catholic, my father would look at what I was wearing, and I certainly couldn't wear micro minis, and I certainly couldn't wear something, so he was quite strict about things like that. But that was the kind of Catholicism we were brought up in. um, and my mother was often pointed out within our parish as the model Christian woman. And it was, and my mother is very spiritual, and she had a spiritual moment in the church, a few spiritual moments, and that's her story, so I won't talk about it too much. But around the same time, she also met a Muslim, and the Muslim spoke to her about Islam, and it was like 15 days, and my mother was Muslim. So as a teenager, it was kind of shock and awe moment. But I suddenly found myself as with a Christian father and a Muslim mother. I'm the eldest child at home, so a lot of, in Indian families, because I'm of Indian heritage, there's a lot of responsibility on the eldest person's shoulders. And I'll be honest, to start with, I hated Islam. I thought Islam covered their women in black blankets. That was my understanding. And I also hated Islam because it broke up my family, to be very frank. Um, but and I was somebody who was interested in religion, and so I decided, for a long time, I decided I was just going to stay Catholic. But I am my mother's daughter, and when I asked her, so when I finally did start talking to her, I asked her, Mama, why did you become Muslim? And she said to me, darling, go and read the Bible. That was all she said to me. And so that young age, I read the Bible page to page. And there were moments in the Bible that made me think there is more to come. And I talk about Genesis, the whole creation paradigm, and I have read about how plants and animals came before light, and I said, actually, plants and animals would not have survived without light. So there's something happening there. And then I read as I kept reading, I read about the covenant God made with Abraham around, circumcising your male children 7 days, or so after they're born. And I said, but Christians don't do that. And I started questioning. And as I kept reading, I came to Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy, I read about, do not take usury, interest. And I said, but we Christians don't really bother. And then finally, I read the Gospel according to St. John. And this is where I usually get emotional, so forgive me. But in the Gospel according to St. John, I read about somebody who was going to come after Jesus. This somebody would be unlettered. He would not speak his own words. He would speak the words of God. And in catechism, I had read, I was taught that this was the Holy Spirit. But when I read the Bible page to page, I knew the Holy Spirit was always there, because before creation, the Holy Spirit hovered above the earth. And I said, Jesus won't be telling us about the Holy Spirit again. And for me, I began to think that might be Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him. So I think that was my first inclination, that I might be becoming, Islam might have something to it, but instead of becoming Muslim, I decided to become atheist. but I was a teenager, but atheism didn't last long. So I read about Hindu spirituality. but I reckon I was too, used to the notion of an Abrahamic God. And then finally decided to read the Quran, and I think I was bowled over quite soon. My mother was away; she wasn't living with us, and she sent me a letter with Surah Al-Ikhlas written in it, and that became like a little tasbih for me. And I'll be saying my rosary with my Hail Marys and my Our Fathers, and then I'd say Surah Ikhlas as well, 11 times. But I think Surah Ikhlas and reading the Quran open things for me. But I can say, hand on heart, I became Muslim without ever having read the Quran. I became Muslim after reading the Bible.